I watched my brother's hand slam down on the mahogany table, his diamond watch catching the afternoon light streaming through the lawyer's office window. The sound made everyone in the room flinch except for Mr. Whitmore, the estate attorney, who simply adjusted his glasses and asked in that maddeningly calm voice, "Mr. Ashford, can you tell me who currently holds fiduciary authority over the Ashford family trust?" My brother Damien's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in 3 weeks, since our parents' funeral, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. That's when I knew everything was about to change. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 3 months earlier, I was sitting in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and slowly dying flowers, holding my mother's hand while she slept. The machines beeped their steady rhythm, a countdown I refused to acknowledge. My father had passed 2 weeks prior, a massive stroke that took him in his sleep. Mom never recovered from the shock. The doctors said it was heart failure, but I knew better. She died of a broken heart. I'd been there every single day for 6 months, watching them decline. I'd put my architecture career on hold, broke up with my girlfriend Sienna when she gave me an ultimatum about wasting my prime years playing nurse, and moved back into my childhood room. The wallpaper still had the same faded pattern I'd stared at as a teenager, dreaming about escaping to design buildings that would touch the sky. Damien showed up twice during those 6 months. Once for Christmas, where he spent 3 hours, took a family photo for his social media with the caption "Family is everything," and left. The second time was the day before Dad died, and he spent most of that visit on his phone, managing his cryptocurrency portfolio. "You're good at this caretaking thing," he'd said to me that day, not looking up from his screen. Always were the nurturing type. I didn't bother responding. Damien had always been good at reframing my sacrifices as my natural role, as if I'd chosen this path instead of having it thrust upon me by his absence. The morning Mom passed, I was alone with her. I'd sent the night nurse home, wanting these final hours to be just us. She opened her eyes around dawn, looked at me with sudden clarity, and whispered, "You've always been my strongest one, Ezra. Remember that." Then she was gone. I called Damien. He was in Monaco. "I'll be back for the funeral," he said. "Can you handle the arrangements? You know I'm useless at that stuff, and you're already there anyway." So I planned everything. I chose the caskets, picked the flowers Mom loved, wrote the obituary, contacted the relatives, organized the reception. Damien flew in the day before on a private jet, looking tanned and relaxed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. At the funeral, he cried beautifully. People consoled him, patted his shoulder, told him how strong he was being. I stood there in my rumpled suit that I'd worn to both parents' funerals, dry-eyed because I'd already cried myself hollow in that hospital room, and watched him perform grief like he was auditioning for an Oscar. "My poor brother," Aunt Cordelia said to me, nodding toward Damien. "He's taking this so hard." I just nodded. What else could I do? The will reading was scheduled for the following week. Damien stayed at our parents' house, the sprawling estate in Thornbury Hills where we'd grown up. I'd been living there for months, but suddenly it felt different with him there. He walked through the rooms like he was appraising them, touching things with a proprietorial air that made my skin crawl. "This place must be worth, what, 15 million now," he said over breakfast one morning. "The market in this area has exploded." "I haven't thought about it," I said, which was true. I'd been too busy keeping Mom comfortable, making sure she could die in her own home like she wanted, to think about real estate values. Damien laughed. "Of course you haven't. You never think about money, Easy. That's always been your problem." The morning of the will reading, I woke up to find Damien already dressed in another expensive suit, this one navy with subtle pinstripes. He was on the phone in the hallway outside my room. "Yeah, should be wrapped up by noon," he was saying. "Then I'll have the liquidity to move on that Shanghai development. Trust me, this is going to be the big one." My stomach twisted, but I pushed the feeling away. Surely he wasn't talking about our parents' estate. Surely he had some decency. Mr. Whitmore's office was downtown, in one of those old buildings with marble floors and brass elevators that groaned as they climbed. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and around the table sat Damien, myself, Aunt Cordelia, Uncle Vincent, and our cousin Marlowe. The extended family, present for their potential piece of the pie. Mr. Whitmore was maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen every family drama imaginable and remained unimpressed by all of it. He opened a leather portfolio and began reading in that formal way lawyers do, all herebys and wherefores. The smaller bequests came first. Aunt Cordelia got Mom's jewelry collection and $50,000. Uncle Vincent got Dad's car collection, worth maybe $200,000. Marlowe got $100,000 and some stock portfolios. Everyone nodded, smiled, thanked the memory of my parents. Then Mr. Whitmore paused, took a sip of water, and continued. To my son Damien Ashford, I leave the sum of $60 million in liquid assets, stocks and bonds, to be transferred immediately upon my passing. The room went silent. $60 million. I knew my parents were wealthy. Dad's tech company had sold for a fortune back in the 90s. But hearing that number out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Damien's face split into a grin he tried to hide behind his hand. Failed completely. Uncle Vincent whistled low. Jesus, Thomas really did well for himself. Mr. Whitmore continued reading, but I'd stopped listening. A strange ringing had started in my ears. 60 million to Damien. The will kept going, mentioning charitable donations, trusts for future grandchildren, maintenance funds for various properties. But nothing about me. My name didn't come up. When Mr. Whitmore finally closed the portfolio, Aunt Cordelia was the one who asked what I couldn't. What about Ezra? Mr. Whitmore glanced at me, and I saw something in his eyes. Pity? Concern? There are additional documents to review, but they require separate discussion. If we could schedule. That won't be necessary right now, Damien interrupted, standing up. His whole demeanor had changed. The grieving son was gone, replaced by something harder, sharper. I think we're done here. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. He started herding everyone toward the door. I sat frozen in my chair, trying to process what had just happened. $60 million. Nothing for me. It didn't make sense. I wasn't expecting an equal split, but nothing? Ezra, you coming? Damien called from the doorway. I stood on shaking legs and followed everyone out. In the elevator, no one would look at me. Aunt Cordelia patted my arm once, helplessly, and then stared at the numbers descending. The ride back to the house was silent. Damien drove, fingers drumming on the steering wheel of Dad's vintage Porsche that was apparently now Uncle Vincent's. He was humming under his breath, some pop song I didn't recognize. Damn, I finally said. What just happened back there? What do you mean? I mean, the will. Did you know? About the money. He shrugged, not taking his eyes off the road. Dad and I talked sometimes. About business stuff. He knew I had the head for managing wealth. You know, strategic thinking, investment mindset. That kind of thing. But 60 million. It's a lot of responsibility, he agreed. But someone has to handle it. You've been great doing the caretaking stuff, easy. Really. But this is a different ballgame. We pulled into the circular driveway of our parents' house. Our house, I'd still been thinking of it that morning. Now I wasn't sure what to think. Damien killed the engine and turned to me. Listen, we should probably talk about logistics. Logistics? Well, yeah. The house, for instance. It's part of the estate, and technically. He trailed off, watching me. My mouth went dry. Technically what? I'm the primary beneficiary, EZ. Which means the property assets fall under my control. And I've been thinking, it doesn't really make sense for you to keep living here. It's a huge place for one person, and frankly, the maintenance costs alone are insane. I stared at him. This is my home. It was our parents' home. Now it's part of their estate. An estate I'm responsible for managing. He said it so reasonably, like he was explaining basic math to a child. Are you seriously kicking me out right now? They've been dead for less than a month. Don't be dramatic. I'm not kicking you out. I'm just saying we need to think practically about the future. You're 32, easy. You can't live in your childhood bedroom forever. I live here because I've spent the last 6 months taking care of our dying parents. My voice cracked. While you were in Monaco and Tokyo and wherever the hell else, I was here. Changing Dad's for, holding Mom's hand, making sure they weren't alone. Damien's expression hardened. And that was your choice. No one forced you to put your life on hold. You could have hired nurses, like I suggested. But you always have to be the martyr, don't you? Always have to be the good son. The words hit like physical blows. I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't my brother, the kid I'd built forts with, the teenager I'd covered for when he snuck out, the man I'd called my best friend for 26 years. Who are you? I whispered. He climbed out of the car. Over the roof, he said, I'm the guy with $60 million and a business to run. Get your stuff together, easy. I need the house empty by the end of the week. I've got potential buyers coming to look at it. I sat in the car long after he'd gone inside, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink Mom used to call God's watercolors. Everything felt unreal, like I was watching my life happen to someone else. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dad's face the day he taught me to ride a bike, Mom's smile when I got accepted to architecture school, Damien and me as kids, laughing until we couldn't breathe over some stupid joke. Where had that person gone? When had my brother been replaced by this stranger? The next morning, I found Damien in Dad's study, on the phone again. Yeah, listed at 18 million, see what bites we get. No, it'll be empty, I'm clearing it out this week. Of course I'm sure, it's my house. He hung up when he saw me. Coffee's on, he said, like everything was normal. Damien, please. Can we talk about this? Really talk. He sighed, the sound of someone infinitely patient dealing with someone infinitely stupid. There's nothing to talk about, easy. This is business. Dad built an empire, and he left it to someone who could manage it. That's me. You're great at the touchy-feely stuff, but you've never had a head for money. This isn't about money. This is about our family, our home. Our family is dead, he said flatly. It's just us now. And I'm trying to set us both up for the future. You'll get something, I'm sure. Probably mentioned in one of those other documents Whitmore was going on about. But the bulk of the estate is mine, and I need to manage it properly. By selling our parents' house a month after they died? By not being sentimental about assets that could be generating revenue. He stood up, straightening his collar. Look, I have meetings all day. Just pack your stuff, okay? I'll have movers come for the furniture. He left. I stood there in Dad's study, surrounded by books he'd never read again, photos of a family that no longer existed, and felt something inside me break completely. Over the next 3 days, I packed up my life. 32 years reduced to boxes and suitcases. Damien was barely there, always out at meetings or on calls. When we did cross paths, he was cordial but distant, like I was a tenant he was evicting rather than his brother. I called a few times to ask about staying a bit longer, just until I could find a place. He always had the same answer, end of the week, easy. I've got buyers coming. On the 4th day, I came home to find the locks changed. My key didn't work. I stood there on the porch where Mom used to sit and read on Sunday mornings, trying my key over and over like maybe the lock would magically remember me. Damien opened the door holding a glass of whiskey, Dad's favorite scotch that was supposed to be saved for special occasions. Sorry, should have mentioned I was changing the security. Here. He handed me a small box. My stuff, the things from my room, packed by strangers. I had the movers put everything in storage. I'll text you the address. You're really doing this? I really am. He took a sip of the scotch. Oh, and easy? Maybe don't tell people you got nothing in the will. It's kind of embarrassing for both of us. Just say we're handling things privately. He started to close the door. Why? I asked. My voice sounded hollow. Just tell me why. For a second, just a second. I thought I saw something human in his eyes. Then it was gone. Because I can, he said, and shut the door. I heard the lock click. Final. Absolute. I drove to a cheap hotel near the airport and checked in with one suitcase, the box of personal items, and my laptop. That night, I lay on the scratchy comforter and stared at the ceiling, listening to planes take off overhead, and tried to figure out where my life had gone so completely wrong. The calls from relatives started the next day. Aunt Cordelia, Uncle Vincent, Cousin Marlowe, even some of Mom's old friends. Damien had gotten to them first. I heard you decided to move on, Aunt Cordelia said carefully. Start fresh somewhere new. That's not exactly. Damien mentioned you were struggling a bit. With the grief. That you needed space to process everything. It took me a second to understand. He was rewriting the narrative. I wasn't thrown out, I left. I wasn't grieving normally, I was struggling, fragile, unstable. Aunt Cordy, that's not what happened. Oh honey, I know family money can be complicated. But Damien said you two had agreed this was best. And really, maybe a fresh start is exactly what you need. You've been so focused on your parents for so long. She meant well. They all did. But Damien had poisoned every relationship, framed every conversation. By the time I'd have explained the truth, I'd sound bitter, jealous, exactly like he'd said I was. I stopped answering the calls. Days blurred together. I sent out resumes to architecture firms, but 6 months out of the field might as well have been 6 years. We'll keep your CV on file. The position has been filled. We're looking for someone with more recent experience. I watched from my hotel room as Damien's social media exploded with his new life. Photos at charity galas, quotes about honoring my parents' legacy through strategic philanthropy, videos of him speaking at investment conferences about generational wealth responsibility. He looked good. Successful, thoughtful, mature. In one photo, taken at some black tie event, he wore Dad's watch. The Patek Philippe Dad had bought to celebrate his company's first $1 million in revenue, the one he'd promised to give me someday because you've always appreciated the craft of things, easy. Now it was on Damien's wrist as he shook hands with venture capitalists and smiled for cameras. 3 weeks after he'd locked me out, my phone rang. Mr. Whitmore. Mr. Ashford, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. There are documents that require your signature. My stomach dropped. Is this where he makes me sign away whatever pittance I was left? Please, just come in tomorrow. 2 p.m. I almost didn't go. What was the point? Sign some papers, get a token amount. Damien had decided to toss me out of the goodness of his heart, be grateful for scraps. But I had nothing else to do, nowhere else to be, so I went. The conference room was the same. Damien was already there, sitting at the head of the table like he owned the place. Maybe he did. He'd probably bought the building by now. Hey EZ, he said, almost warmly. Like we were friends. Like the last month hadn't happened. Good to see you. I didn't respond, just took the chair farthest from him. Mr. Whitmore entered with that same leather portfolio, plus several additional folders. He sat down, arranged his papers with precise care, and looked between us. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. We have several items to address regarding the Ashford estate. Can we speed this along? Damien interrupted. I have a flight to Singapore at 6. Mr. Whitmore's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. This will take as long as it takes, Mr. Ashford. He opened the first folder and began going through papers I didn't understand. Legal language, property transfers, tax documents. Damien signed things with theatrical flourishes, barely reading them. I just watched numb. Then Mr. Whitmore opened a different folder. This one was older, the paper heavier. He read silently for a moment, and I saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Mr. Damien Ashford, he said, before we proceed further, I need to ask you a question. Sure, shoot. Can you tell me who currently holds fiduciary authority over the Ashford Family Trust? The room went very still. Damien blinked. What? The Ashford Family Trust. Established by your parents in 1998. Can you tell me who serves as the primary trustee? I assumed given the will. Damien's confidence wavered. I mean, I received the bulk of the liquid assets, so obviously I would. That's not what I asked. Mr. Whitmore's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. I asked who holds fiduciary authority. Damien looked at me, then back at Whitmore. I don't understand the question. Then let me clarify. Mr. Whitmore pulled out another document, this one I recognized. The trust papers I'd signed years ago, back when I'd turned 25 and Dad had sat me down for what I thought was just a formality. The Ashford Family Trust currently holds all real property assets, including the family residence, the Montana cabin, the commercial properties in Portland and Seattle, and controlling interest in Ashford Holdings LLC. The trust also holds the right of first refusal on any estate assets disposed of by beneficiaries. Damien's face had gone pale. What are you saying? I'm saying that while you received $60 million in liquid assets, as specified in the will, you do not own the house. The trust does. And you cannot sell the house without the trustee's approval. But I already listed it. I have buyers coming next week. Then you've made a significant legal error. Mr. Whitmore turned to me. Mr. Ezra Ashford, as primary trustee of the Ashford Family Trust, were you consulted about the potential sale of the Thornberry Hills property? My voice came out as a whisper. No. Did you authorize eviction of any beneficiary from said property? No. Did you approve any changes to the property's security or access? No. Mr. Whitmore looked back at Damien. Then I'm afraid we have a problem. Damien's hand slammed down on the table, the same gesture that started this whole story. This is insane. Dad left me the money, he obviously wanted me in charge. Your father, Mr. Whitmore said coldly, left you money because you value money. He left your brother authority because he values responsibility. There's a difference. He slid a stack of papers toward me. Mr. Ezra Ashford, as trustee, you have full discretion over all trust assets. The $60 million your brother received was his inheritance, free and clear. But everything else, the real legacy your parents built, falls under your stewardship. I stared at the papers. My name, right there at the top. Primary trustee. Fiduciary authority. Asset control. I don't understand, I said. Why didn't you tell me this at the first reading? Because your parents' instructions were specific. They wanted to see what each of you would do with your initial inheritance. Your brother received money and immediately sought to liquidate family assets. You received nothing and asked for nothing. He paused. That told them everything they needed to know. It told me everything I needed to know. Damien stood up so fast his chair fell over. This is bullshit. I'll fight this, I'll sue, You'll do nothing, Mr. Whitmore said. Because if you attempt to challenge the trust, there's a clause that allows the trustee to reduce your beneficial interest to the minimum required by law. $50,000 a year. Is that really the fight you want to have? Damien looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. I saw panic there, and rage, and underneath it all fear. Easy, come on. We're brothers. You're not going to screw me over like this. I thought about Mom's hand in mine as she died. Dad's watch on Damien's wrist. The locks being changed. The social media posts. The lies he'd told our family. The hotel ceiling I'd stared at for 3 weeks. You sold the house, I said quietly. Our parents' house. You threw me out and sold it. I can fix that. I'll call the realtor right now, cancel the listing. You can move back in. We can work this out. You told Aunt Cordelia I was unstable. I was trying to protect you. People were asking questions, I thought. You thought you could control the narrative. Control the money. Control everything. I looked down at the papers in front of me. My hands were shaking. You want to know the really sad part? If you'd just been decent, if you'd included me, treated me like family, I would have given you whatever you wanted. I didn't care about the money. I never did. Then don't care about it now. Sign the properties over to me, we'll split everything 50-50 and… But I care about the disrespect, I continued, like he hadn't spoken. I care that you couldn't even wait until they were cold in the ground before you started liquidating their lives. I care that you looked me in the eye and threw me away like I was nothing. Damien's face twisted into something ugly. You self-righteous prick. You think you're so much better than me because you played nurse while I was out building actual wealth? You've always been like this, always playing the victim, the martyr. Enough. Mr. Whitmore's voice cracked like a whip. Mr. Damien Ashford, you are in violation of the trust terms. You have 1 week to vacate the Thornberry Hills property and return all keys and access codes to the trustee. Failure to comply will result in legal action. You can't be serious. I'm extremely serious. This meeting is over. Damien looked at me one more time. I saw him realize it was really happening, that the game was over and he'd lost. Then he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. In the silence that followed, Mr. Whitmore poured me a glass of water from the pitcher on the table. Your parents knew, he said gently. They knew exactly who each of you were. That's why they structured things this way. They let him think he won. They gave him rope. He chose to hang himself with it. He pushed the papers closer. You don't have to make any decisions today. But you should know, the trust is substantial. Beyond the properties, there are investment portfolios, business interests, cash reserves. In total, roughly $90 million in assets under your authority. 90 million. More than Damien's 60. I started laughing, couldn't help it. The absurdity of it all. They really knew, I said. They did. Your father told me once that Damien had his mother's head for numbers, but his grandfather's heart for greed. Said you had your mother's heart for people and his own stubborn integrity. He smiled slightly. He was betting the integrity would matter more in the long run. I signed the papers with numb fingers. Mr. Whitmore walked me through everything, the bank accounts I now controlled, the properties I could access, the decisions that were now mine to make. It was overwhelming and surreal, and I kept waiting to wake up. At the door, he stopped me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about how this played out. Your parents hoped Damien would surprise them. That the money would be enough, that he'd be generous with it. They gave him the chance to do the right thing. And he didn't. No, he didn't. I drove to the Thornberry Hills house in a daze. Used my old key, which still worked in the original locks. Damien hadn't actually changed, just told me he had. Another lie in a mountain of them. The house was exactly as I'd left it. My room untouched, my parents' room sealed like a shrine. Damien had been living in the guest wing, treating the main house like a museum he was preparing to sell. I walked through the empty rooms, trailing my fingers along walls that held 30 years of memories. In the kitchen, I found Mom's recipe box, the one she'd kept since her wedding. In Dad's study, his reading glasses on the desk next to a book he'd never finish. I sat in Dad's chair and cried for the first time since the funeral. Not quiet tears but huge gasping sobs that shook my whole body. For my parents, for my brother who'd been replaced by a stranger, for the month I'd spent thinking I was worthless. My phone rang. Damien. Please, he said when I answered. Ezra, please, we can fix this. I screwed up, I know I did, but we're family. That has to count for something. It did count, I said. That's why it hurt so much. I'll make it right. I'll apologize to Aunt Cordelia, to everyone. I'll take down the social media posts. Just don't kick me out, don't freeze my access. You don't have access to anything that's mine. The trust, the properties, none of it. You have your 60 million. Do something good with it. 60 million isn't enough to. To what? To fund your lifestyle? To impress people at galas? Dad built his first company with a $50,000 loan. You have 60 million and it's not enough. Silence. Move out by Friday, I said. Or I'll have you removed. I hung up. Over the next few weeks, I made decisions. I kept the Thornberry Hills house and moved back into it, properly this time. I kept the Montana cabin where we'd spent summers as kids. I sold the commercial properties because I didn't want to be a landlord. I took the money and established a foundation in my parents' names, focused on healthcare access and caregiver support. I called the architecture firm I'd left and asked if they'd consider taking me back part-time while I figured out my next move. They said yes immediately. Apparently, my old supervisor had been wondering what happened to me. I reached out to Sienna, the girlfriend I'd broken up with. We met for coffee. She was engaged to someone else now, happy, and I was glad for her. We parted as friends. Damien's social media presence gradually shifted. Fewer galas, more entrepreneur grind posts. I heard through Aunt Cordelia that he'd lost money on some cryptocurrency venture. Then more on a startup that went under. The 60 million was still substantial, but it wasn't infinite, and Damien was spending like it was. He called sometimes, always the same conversation. Asking for loans, for access to the trust, for family support. I kept my answers simple, no. 6 months after that meeting in Mr. Whitmore's office, I was sitting on the back porch of the house, watching sunset paint the sky in Mom's watercolors, when I got a text from Damien. I get it now. Why they chose you. I stared at the message for a long time. Thought about responding. Decided not to. Some lessons you have to learn on your own. A year later, the foundation was thriving. We'd supported 3 hospitals, funded 2 caregiver assistance programs, and helped 40 families afford in-home care for their elderly parents. I'd returned to architecture part-time and was designing my first building in years, a community center with clean lines and lots of light. I was having dinner with Aunt Cordelia when she brought up Damien. He asked about you, she said carefully. Wanted to know if you'd be at the family Christmas. What did you tell him? That it was your house, your invitation to extend. She paused. He's different now. Quieter. I think losing everything humbled him. He didn't lose everything. He lost access to more. Maybe that's what he needed to lose. I thought about it. Thought about Christmases as kids, building snowmen in the yard. Thought about the stranger who'd thrown me out. Thought about the man he might become if he really learned something from all this. Tell him he can come, I said finally. But he's sleeping in the guest room, and if he mentions money once, he's out. Aunt Cordelia smiled. You're more forgiving than I'd be. I'm not forgiving him. But Mom and Dad would have wanted me to leave the door open. So I'm leaving it open. Whether he walks through it is up to him. Christmas came. Damien showed up in a normal suit, not designer. No watch, no flashy car. He was quiet through dinner, helped with dishes without being asked, didn't pull out his phone once. As he was leaving, he stopped on the porch. Thank you, he said, for this. It's just dinner. It's more than that. It's... He struggled with the words. It's what I should have done. When they died. I should have had dinner with you. Should have grieved with you. Should have been your brother instead of, whatever I became. Yeah, I said. You should have. He nodded, accepting it. For what it's worth, I'm trying to be better. The money's mostly gone. Bad investments, worse decisions. But I got a job. Actual work, consulting for startups. It's humbling, but it's honest. Good. Think we'll ever get back what we had? As brothers. I looked at him, really looked. Saw the kid who'd built forts with me underneath the man who'd betrayed me. Saw the potential for something better than either version. I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm willing to find out. Slowly. He smiled, small and genuine. Slowly works. After he left, I went back inside to the house that was finally, truly mine. Not because I'd inherited it, but because I'd earned the right to protect it. To protect what my parents built, not just the money and property, but the values they'd tried to instill. Damien had gotten $60 million and thought he'd won. But our parents knew something he didn't. Money measures wealth. Character measures worth. And in the end, they'd left the wealth to the son who already had the worth. I stood in Dad's study, looking at the family photos on the wall. Mom and Dad young and happy. Damien and me as kids, arms around each other, grinning at the camera. Maybe we'd get back there someday. Maybe we wouldn't. But I was okay either way. Because I finally understood what Mom meant in those last moments. I'd always been the strongest one. I just hadn't known it until I had to be.